English time, my people. Good night, everybody. How are you? How was your day? How's everything?
Hello, teacher.
Hello, Elsie. Good night.
Good night.
Good night. Excellent night. Let's start today's class with a little bit of practice. You sent me your writing. I have some writings from Laurita, Brian, and Elsie. I saw your papers also, but you did
Yes,
glossary. That's your
the
glossary.
glossary. Yes.
Yes, no problem, no problem. We can do that, the other one later. I'm not going to, we are not going to check it just today because I want to make something a little bit more difficult, which is listen. I want to focus a little bit more on listening. So in the case of the people who sent the writing to me, I'm going to check it manually and send it to you in a yeah, on WhatsApp the same way. Probably tomorrow we can take some time if we finish today's practice. I think today's practice is much more difficult, so we need a little bit more practice, vocabulary, of course, pronunciation, and all the things that are necessary.
Teacher,
Yes.
the letter um to the right is only an example.
The letter to the right is yes, it's an example.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, that one is like something you can check as a yeah for inspiration. You know what I mean? That's the one. So right now, what we are going to do is, of course, Friday, Thursday, listening Thursday, which is going to take very important stuff because pronunciation, British pronunciation is tricky. So we need to remember how some words are very different. We saw this vocabulary in the previous class, and we need to consider these words when we are listening. There are also, it's important to consider one, the British versus American vocabulary, but also it's important to consider automatic expressions and phrasal verbs. Make sure to know and dominate all vocabulary seen in previous courses so you have a good time during the listening test, right? Sometimes the answers are tricky because the answers are easy, but they use B1 synonyms. So the more you progress with your glossary, the better time you will have in the listening section. Today, we are going to discover what happens to part 2. The listening section has 4 parts. Last week, we finished with pictures. This one. We can consider part 1 ready, and now we are going to continue with part 2. 6 short recordings. Okay? Let's call it like that. We are talking about 6 short recordings because you are going to listen to 6 conversations. Each conversation corresponds to one question. You need to practice your comprehension to be able to detect what is the correct answer in each of them. In the example, I have this exercise that says, you will hear a man called Frank talking on the radio about looking for ships that sank at the sea a long time ago. Do you have any question in the vocabulary? you will hear a man called Frank talking on the radio about looking for ships that sank at the sea.
What is the meaning of sank?
Perfect question. Do you remember what happened to Titanic? The Titanic hit the iceberg and then it sank below the ocean.
Okay, thank you.
That's sank. And of course, this matches because we are talking about the sea. The sea long ago. The first conversation says, the first old ship which Frank found was A, covered by rocks, B, older than he first thought, and C, easy to find. We are going to listen to the first recording. So we can see the answer. Yes, again. I don't find the audio. Okay. Here it is. Okay, attention.
Now turn to part 2, questions 8 to 13. You will hear a man called Frank talking on the radio about looking for ships that sank at sea long ago. For each question, put a tick in the correct box. You now have 45 seconds to look at the questions for part 2.
As you can hear, the recording gave you 45 seconds to read all the options. You know, we have two formats. You can read all the questions, or you will hear 6 different recordings. In this case, there are 6 different questions for one recording. You know, kinda similar process. Sometimes the people change, sometimes it doesn't. In this particular case, it's only one person talking. Now let's listen to Frank.
Listen carefully. You will hear the recording twice.
Frank, tell us about some of the ships you've discovered.
Well, there's nothing quite like finding your first old ship. It was 300 years old. It was just lying at the bottom of the sea, so it wasn't difficult to find. Most are covered in sand and rocks, but this one wasn't.
Now listen again.
Now we are ready to start. Listen carefully. You will hear the recording twice.
Frank, tell us about some of the ships you've discovered.
Well, there's nothing quite like finding your first old ship. It was 300 years old. It was just lying at the bottom of the sea, so it wasn't difficult to find. Most are covered in sand and rocks, but this...
Which one is the answer? What do you have? Benji, tell me, what did you answer? A, B, or C? Benji, are you there? Okay, Benji is not there. So Brian, what do you have in this case?
Hello.
Hi.
I'm not sure. I'm sure that is not C. It was difficult to find.
Okay.
At the end, he said something about the ship was covered by sand and rocks.
Okay.
But I think at the end he said that that ship wasn't.
Correct.
So, but I didn't hear nothing about the B answer.
Uh-oh.
But just for discard,
Huh. Just to discard. To discard.
just to discard, I choose B.
Just to discard, you just choose B, older than he first thought. We never have information about letter B. He never talks about that. But something that you understood correct is that Frank said the word difficult. No? For Frank, it was difficult to find. You will be surprised because yes, he said the word difficult, but he used the word wasn't. It wasn't difficult to find. This is a very common mistake in this particular exam. We never consider negatives. Negatives are very important too. Let's listen again. Confirmation.
About some of the ships you've discovered.
Well, there's nothing quite like finding your first old ship. It was 300 years old. It was just lying at the bottom of the sea, so it wasn't difficult to find.
Did you hear it?
Uh-huh.
It's clear now, no?
Yeah.
He literally said, it was just laying in the bottom of the sea.
Mhm.
So it wasn't difficult to find.
Mhm.
You got it? That makes it option C. Option C is the one that is correct. You got it?
Yes.
Oh, yes. That's the one. Everybody, what questions do you have about this? Do you think this is difficult or this is easy?
So.
So. Why so?
I didn't. um, I didn't. How do you say distinguir?
Distinguir is distinguish. We have said that word before. This is vocabulary from previous classes.
Distinguish.
Distinguish.
I didn't distinguish was or wasn't.
Was or wasn't. Ah, okay. Well, that's very important to catch. Let's consider something important we said in previous classes was phonetics. In the first classes, we talked about the silent T. Sometimes the letter T is silent after the letter N. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I always wanted to be a father. Wanted, not wanted. In the same case, you are not going to listen wasn't. You are going to listen wasn't. Wasn't. The T is silent. Listen to this.
Listen carefully.
Frank, tell us about some of the ships you've discovered.
Well, there's nothing quite like finding your first old ship. It was 300 years old. It was just lying at the bottom of the sea, so it wasn't difficult to find.
Yeah, it wasn't.
The T doesn't sound.
No,
Transition. It
wasn't.
wasn't difficult, exactly. It wasn't difficult to find.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to consider phonetics when we are listening. That's why I insist in the phonetical soundboard. I insist in the symbols. I insist in the literal comprehension, because phonetics are very different from Spanish. And if we consider Spanish phonetics, we will never understand British and American people. They pronounce words very, very differently. You see?
Yes.
That's the one. What other observation can you make in this case? What other observation do you have about it?
For example, he said the ship covered it with sand and rocks, and
Again,
later
the ship what?
the ship was covered with
Okay.
sand and rocks, and
Yes.
letter A only is with rocks.
Well, it's included. It's included. If you say covered by rocks, and the person mentioned covered by rocks, it doesn't matter that he pronounced sand. It's the same. The problem is the negative. One more time. Because he said that sometimes ships are covered by rocks. Sometimes. And then specifically he says, this one wasn't.
Yeah.
Listen again.
Most are covered in sand and rocks.
Most are covered in sand and rocks. Most is similar to say the majority.
Okay.
Most are covered in sand and rocks.
But this one wasn't.
Oh, doesn't.
Wasn't.
Sorry.
Wasn't. Because it's a description. Covered is a description.
Yeah.
But this one wasn't covered by rocks. That eliminates option A. That was a very good observation, Cesar. Very, very good observation. Because we can, if we do a teamwork on the listening, we can eliminate together things that are not necessary. You know? So that observation, Cesar, was very necessary in the class. Good job.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, please take 45 seconds to read the questions and answer to Frank's conversation. Let's get familiar to some vocabulary so we can understand the audio first. Here, you have 4 words that are probably new for you. Sink is the action of the Titanic. Elsie asked, hey teacher, what is sank? Well, sank is the past of sink. You know? Do you want some mosquitoes? I can go for mosquitoes. Number 2, up to date. Up to date is similar to modern or fashionable. Number 4, worth. This is a description that means having money and possessions of a particular value. If I have possessions, I have worth. This is similar to treasure. Worth is similar to money, let's say. And antique, no, actually, worth is similar to value. Let's associate this one. Okay, worth is similar to value. And the last one is antique. Antique is an object that is old. You usually buy antiques in the market. Okay. So there we go. Questions? Okay. Let me give you 45 seconds. To read the questions. 1, 2, 3. Action. I wrote 45 minutes. What happened? All right. Let's play the audio. You will listen to the audio twice.
About some...
Listen carefully. You will hear the recording twice.
Frank, tell us about some of the ships you've discovered.
Well, there's nothing quite like finding your first old ship. It was 300 years old. It was just lying at the bottom of the sea, so it wasn't difficult to find. Most are covered in sand and rocks, but this one wasn't. I'm actually a teacher, not a full-time diver. I dive in my free time, but I often get to them before the professional divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment. Another thing that helps is talking to fishermen who tell me about their local area. I've even written a book about some of their experiences. At the moment, I'm looking for the gold from a ship called the Seabird. It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859. Everything was going fine until the ship reached the English coast, when it crashed into some rocks in a very strong wind and sank to the bottom of the sea. It was carrying gold from Australia, and most of it is still at the bottom of the sea. My wedding ring is actually made from gold, which I found on an 18th century sailing ship. A friend of mine, another diver, has already found £88,000 worth of gold from different ships. He's now decided to give up his job and become a full-time diver. My house is full of things like coins, bottles, and old guns. My wife is always complaining about the number of objects around the house. She says I should open an antiques shop. But I love all these old things. Anyway, in the end, I gave some things from my collection to museums, because I didn't want to sell them. But my wife still wasn't very pleased, I'm afraid. As diving is a dangerous hobby, it's not a good idea to try to teach yourself. I'd advise anyone interested to do what I did. There are some excellent diving clubs, like the one I joined, which run courses for beginners. It's best to do one of these before you go on a diving holiday.
Now listen again.
There's nothing quite like finding...
Listen carefully. You will hear the recording twice.
Frank, tell us about some of the ships you've discovered.
Well, there's nothing quite like finding your first old ship. It was 300 years old. It was just lying at the bottom of the sea, so it wasn't difficult to find. Most are covered in sand and rocks, but this one wasn't. I'm actually a teacher, not a full-time diver. I dive in my free time, but I often get to them before the professional divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment. Another thing that helps is talking to fishermen who tell me about their local area. I've even written a book about some of their experiences. At the moment, I'm looking for the gold from a ship called the Seabird. It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859. Everything was going fine until the ship reached the English coast, when it crashed into some rocks in a very strong wind and sank to the bottom of the sea. It was carrying gold from Australia, and most of it is still at the bottom of the sea. My wedding ring is actually made from gold, which I found on an 18th century sailing ship. A friend of mine, another diver, has already found £88,000 worth of gold from different ships. He's now decided to give up his job and become a full-time diver. My house is full of things like coins, bottles, and old guns. My wife is always complaining about the number of objects around the house. She says I should open an antiques shop. But I love all these old things. Anyway, in the end, I gave some things from my collection to museums, because I didn't want to sell them. But my wife still wasn't very pleased, I'm afraid. As diving is a dangerous hobby, it's not a good idea to try to teach yourself. I'd advise anyone interested to do what I did. There are some excellent diving clubs, like the one I joined, which run courses for beginners. It's best to do one of these before you go on a diving holiday.
That is the end of part 2. Okay. Let's check the rest of the answers. Number 2. Jessica, what did you hear on number 2, girl?
Hello.
Hi, girl.
Hello, teacher. I guess, no, I suppose is letter A.
Hey.
I am not sure. Letter A or letter B.
Okay. Choose one.
I think not. Letter B.
Letter B. Okay. So you say letter B.
Yes.
Is a professional diver. What
No,
information do you...
Not teacher. Sorry. Letter A.
Okay. Final decision, letter A. What information do you get to choose letter A?
I heard, for example, I heard that he I am not sure, dives. He dives with a professional diver.
Okay.
Yes.
Watch out. Are you speaking in present, in past, or in future?
In past,
In past. Okay. What is the past of dive?
I am not sure.
Dive in past is dive. This is a regular verb.
Regular.
Yep.
Dive
Mhm.
is regular.
Yeah. Regular verb. Dive.
Dive.
Exactly. Mhm.
Dive.
Mhm.
Okay. He died with a professional diver.
Okay.
was difficult to find ships, but he had the information about the location, and he read read and he read books. I am not sure history book, but books.
History books. Well, that answer is actually incorrect.
Now turn to part 2.
One is actually, oops, I gave you one answer. The answer is letter C. So you were fighting versus A and B, A and B, A and B. And at the end, it was actually that. You know, the reason was, what happened? Start and click. Start and click. Start and click. Yeah, let's listen to the text, because there is a little bit of controversy in the second part. In the second part, there is something like that. Listen to this.
Now turn
From a ship called the Seabird. It was an enormous... I dive in my free time, but I often get to them before the professional divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment.
What did he say in this section? Similar activity as we did in previous classes. Word by word, what did he say?
He say he up at where?
Up
where?
Up where? Okay,
At
continue.
where? Like I am not sure. Optimal. Optimal. And I am not sure.
All right.
I guess equipment.
Okay, pronunciation.
Equipment. Equipment.
The first thing that we need to do with you is to forget Spanish forever and ever. Because you are reading the word as if the pronunciation is in Spanish. In Spanish, the Q and the U is silent. But in English,
Equipment.
exactly. It's equipment. That's right. If you pronounce the words correctly, you will understand people when they speak. So let's listen what he said about the equipment. Listen again.
Diver. I dive in my free time, but I often get to them before the professional divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment.
So what does he have? Aha. What does he have?
Optimal equipment. But it means a work.
Eliminate optimal. He never says optimal.
He says up something with up.
And also the word optimal, I think it doesn't exist, eh? I think the word, let me go to the dictionary. Oh, yes, it exists. I was thinking in optimum. Optimal, the best possible.
Optimal.
It could be, but he never uses optimal. You are confusing the first phonetic up, it matches. That sounds good. After that, different. Listen again.
Before the professional divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment.
You see how the final syllable is not al?
Yes, I think it's meant optimist.
The last letter is a T, no?
Yes.
Read this.
Okay. The active, no.
This,
Yes.
pronounce it
Okay. To update.
again.
Up to date.
What is the pronunciation of the second word?
Mm,
The second word, very simple. How do you pronounce it?
the second word.
Yeah.
To. But
Check the
it's like the.
You are not checking the symbols. What is the schwa sound? Over here. Look. We click over here. We listen to this.
Yeah.
So how do you pronounce this?
The.
Ta. Exactly.
The.
Ta. Together.
Up to date.
Ta. Ta ta ta. Not two. Ta.
Up to up the.
Up to. Excellent.
Up to.
Ignore the letters.
Up to date.
Today. Up to date. Listen again.
Most are covered in sand and rocks, but this one wasn't. I'm actually a teacher, not a full-time diver. I dive in my free time, but I often get to them before the professional divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment.
So what does he have?
Up to date. It's a equipment.
Again, it's literal. Qui.
Yes, but the pronunciation is equipment.
Qui. Qui. Qui.
Equipment, sorry.
Exactly. Equipment. The word up to date means modern. What word is a synonym in this case?
Okay. Latest.
Pronunciation. One more time. How do you pronounce this?
Late. Sorry. Late. I am not sure
Relative.
when I say that. Latest.
Latest. Exactly. Modern. Latest.
Okay. It's the same that up to date.
As up to date. That's correct.
Okay.
As a description. And this is a composed adjective. So it should be together like this.
Okay.
Got it?
Yes.
Good job. So your feedback in your case would be practicing English without text. You need to start practicing the language only with your ears and phonetics. You need to practice the reference on phonetics because everything that you know, you pronounce it literally, like in Spanish with literal Spanish phonetics. Equipment is the best example.
Yes.
That's a classic example. Don't worry, this is a lot of people do that. So the switch is in your phonetics. Study your phonetics. Okay. Now, what about the rest? The rest got confused with this too? Or was it easy?
Yes, I was confused.
What was the confusion in your case?
I was in the same way that Jessica. I thought the answer was A or B.
Because you hear explicitly the word professional.
Mm-hmm.
No? Exactly. And about the history books, I think he mentions the history books because
he said something that his friend gave him books or something like that.
Okay. I think the most difficult here is letter A. I agree. Okay. Let's listen the previous information about the books.
Frank,
Lying at the bottom of the sea, so it wasn't difficult to find. Most are covered in sand and rocks, but this one wasn't. I'm actually a teacher, not a full-time diver. I dive in my free time, but I often get to them before the professional divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment. Another thing that helps is talking to fishermen who tell me about their local area. I've even written a book about some of their experiences. At the moment, I'm...
Okay. Did you hear what he said about the book? Or not? Okay, let's listen again.
divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment. Another thing that helps is talking to fishermen who tell me about their local area. I've even written a book about some of their experiences.
What did he say about the book, Brian?
It's a book about the experiences of that guy that show him the local area.
He uses very explicit word. He said fisherman.
um
Fisherman. I think we need to include this word in the vocabulary. Let's go through the vocabulary. Fisherman. A fisherman, or fishermen in plural,
Fisherman.
Fisherman.
is a person who catches fish. Okay. Plural fisherman. Okay. So he's talking about local fishermen in this case. Okay. And he precisely, you understood 50%. You understood that he has, or something with a book of local fishermen. But what did he do with the book? Did you catch that information?
I think no.
Let's listen again. Everybody can help, eh? Please help me detect this vocabulary. Okay, attention.
Now turn to part 2, question
Rocks in a very strong wind, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night. I've even written a book about some of their experiences, about their local area. I've even written a book about some of their experiences.
Now turn to part 2. Now turn to part 2.
Jesus Christ. Okay, I repeated the audio twice. Did you detect it or it was difficult? No, right?
he,
It's so
he
hard.
read it.
Again?
He read it.
Close. The word read it doesn't exist because read is irregular. It's read, read, read. So there is another thing that is happening here. Is a different verb. What do you do with books, guys? Give me example of verbs that you usually use with books.
Bright,
Right. Exactly. What is the past participle of right?
broad,
The past participle.
Written.
Britain,
Written. That's why you understood read it. or you imagine the word read it. You know, read it doesn't exist, but written, yes. And it sounds very similar. So what happened here is that you read the word read, and then you associate with the sound, and that is incorrect. He has written books about local fishermen. He is the author of books about local fishermen. Understand? Understand. Yes, Elsie?
Can you repeat it?
Sure. Let's listen.
I dive in my free time, but I often get to them before the professional divers because I have good, up-to-date equipment. Another thing that helps is talking to fishermen who tell me about their local area. I've even written a book about some of their experiences. At the
Do you detect the reading?
Teacher, I don't get who written the book. I think that is the fisherman, but maybe he's this guy Frank. No, Frank. I can distinguish.
If you, what is the person? If you are Frank, the grammatical person is
I.
I. If you use the auxiliary for the past participle, because he said written, no? So what is the auxiliary necessary? Formula 6. Exactly.
Has.
No, I have.
Has.
No, have. Because he has, she has, but I have. You know?
Okay.
Contraction I have?
I've.
So they have I've. Then he says the word even, which is vocabulary. And then he says written. I've even written a book about. Okay. Let's listen again. Confirmation.
fishermen who tell me about their local area. I've even written a book about some of their experiences.
Like magic. You see? Like water. The thing is that he repeated I. Do you know what is stutter? No, right? Stutter is like the, you know, this is to stutter. So Frank stutters and he says, I even written a book about it.
Another thing that helps is talking to fishermen who tell me about their local area. I've even written a book about some of their
Ta-da! There it is. Difficult, I know. Number 2 was really difficult.
Jesus Christ.
Yep. We need to include very natural human interactions. A human interaction is a stutter. Stutter. Stutter.
Like Bill.
Like who?
It, the movie. It.
The movie? Yes, one character has a stutter, no?
Bill.
Yes, I remember. Uh-huh.
I am a junior in the CSD program, which is...
But he's not stuttering. What's the name? Bill, Brian?
Yes. Bill.
Bill? Jesus Christ, what happened? Billy Bandy. What's going on? Again, my keyboard. Just a second. I'm having technical issues with my keyboard. Okay. Bill from it. Sorry. Bill then bro. We don't have a video. I need a video. Stutter. Jesus Christ. Well, you understand stutter, right? Yes.
But if the storm swept Georgie in, we should have gone.
He's gone. Yes, that's a stutter. You know. So in the audios, sometimes we face these type of problems that is very normal in a conversation. People stutter. So we need to be prepared for probably the person, probably one phonetic is going to be repeated. This is very, very, very common. Okay. So let's try with number 3. Right? Help me. Who has the answer to this one? Benji, do you have number 3?
No.
You don't have number 3?
I don't have the answer.
Don't worry. What about Hector? Do you have number 3? If you don't have the answer, no problem. You can say no. That's difficult. I know.
I'm sorry. No.
Oh, no problem. No problem. What about Caesar? Do you have it? Number 3? Oh, yes.
Yes, teacher. Letter A.
Letter A, right? Well, I already showed the answer, no? It was letter B, but let's see why we selected letter A. Let's listen.
Experiences. At the moment, I'm looking for the gold from a ship called the Seabird. It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859. Everything was going fine, and
there is the 1859, no?
Yeah.
What is the action that he mentions? What happened specifically in 1859?
The ship. The ship sank in 1855. 55.
What? This is not a 5.
59.
59, yes.
Sorry.
Okay, so we need to check what happened because he never said sank. So you need to
find. Because he speak he found the ship in Australia.
Okay.
And he found the ship in 1859.
Okay, 50 no. 59.
59.
Okay, if he found the ship in 1859, how old is this guy?
Oh no. The ship made in 1859.
Made? The verb is so important, man. You first said sank, then you said found, and then you said made. These 3 are different. Take a decision because the audio depends on your on that, you know, on the verb.
Yeah.
So
No, he found the ship in Australia.
okay, but what happened in 1859? That's important information. So we can eliminate this option.
Yeah.
If you have the name of Australia, perfect. That's excellent, but that is not relevant. We need
No.
to.
I understood the ship was made in 1859.
Okay, you take a decision, no? And you said made.
Yeah.
Well, I want you to mentalize the phonetic for the word made. And let's check if the person pronounces the word made. You need to mentalize person verb complement. Okay, when people speak. I think you are only considering the words that you listen, but you are not considering person verb complement, the previous information. So let's listen again and let's focus on the verb. Okay?
Okay.
Attention.
At the moment, I'm looking for the gold from a ship called the Seabird. It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859.
Okay.
Phonetics. What did he say?
Okay. He said, in this moment, I'm looking for a ship was sunk in Australia.
Mm.
And then he said, oh, don't remember that.
I think
he
you
said-
are trying to memorize too much information. Separate
Yeah.
the first part when you said I am looking for blah 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 blah. This is the introduction.
Okay.
Because he says I am looking for a ship that was called the Seabird.
Okay.
Right? So all this information that is not relevant. That's information necessary to detect the answer. But now we need to know what is the verb, what happened in 1859. What is the verb? Final answer, final repetition, so we can pass to the next student. Attention.
Okay.
I'm looking for the gold from a ship called the Seabird. It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859.
Okay. Ship was boiled.
Okay.
Boiled. This ship.
That's it.
Yeah, the boiled in the Australia in Australia. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the phonetic doesn't match.
No.
No, the phonetic doesn't match. The first red flag is the meaning of boil. Do you know what is boil?
Yeah.
What is boil?
Boiled in Spanish.
Okay.
Construir. Boiled.
Ah, no. That's build.
Build.
Build is construir. Boil es hervir.
Sí.
Pronunciation is everything. That's the most important part. The word built is mentioned.
Built.
Yes, of course. But that was not the answer here. He said, let's check if another person can catch the verb. Okay. Can you help Caesar, guys? For example, let's go with With Elsie, do you know the birth? What happened in 1859?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Coming from Australia.
Coming from.
Or
The answer is correct. Yes, of course. Coming from. It doesn't sound similar to build. Listen.
Called the Seabird. It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia.
Coming from Australia. It was coming from Australia.
It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859.
You got it? It was coming from Australia in a winter night. It was coming from Australia on a winter night in November, I think he says. He's in November, I don't remember. But in 1859.
Winter is not in November.
Oh, there's no November, right? For some reason, I imagined in November.
It was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859.
Ah, yes. Eliminated November.
What's up, teacher?
Yes, I was. When I see the picture, I imagine November.
Yeah.
That's the problem. But the point is that the verb is the most important part. You cannot ignore the verb. And you cannot ignore the phonetic. The phonetic is the most important part. We need to stick to that. Okay. Question? Anyone?
Yeah. For this winter night, I'm supposed that had a storm. No?
Yes, but there is more specific information after. Later, we have more information. Listen.
Now turn to part 2.
Jesus Christ.
Now to fight. It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859. Everything was going fine until the ship reached the English coast, when it...
Everything was going fine.
From Australia on a winter night in 1859. Everything was going fine.
Okay? Everything was going fine. Until. What is until?
Similar to that's it? No. Then?
Then, okay.
And
I like it. Until is similar to then. So everything was going fine until something happened.
Until the ship reached the English coast.
Until the ship reached the English coast. What is reached? Until the ship reached the English coast. We saw this word in previous classes.
I don't remember.
Anyone help?
Similar to come or become?
Becoming, comma, very, very different. Select.
Become.
Incorrect, because Pikachu becomes Raichu. Transforms into. So the ship doesn't transform. You see? But
similar
yes
to arrive.
Exactly. So everything was fine until the ship arrived to England, reach the English coast.
Yeah.
Okay. The English coast is not the language. It's not English, the language. It's
No.
the beach. The beach of
Yeah.
England.
Yeah.
Okay. And then
When it crashed into some rocks in a very strong wind,
when it crashed.
Crushed in the rocks.
Mhm.
The very
Or-
storm.
In a storm, exactly. Into the rocks, into, right? Yesterday's connectors. When it
Yeah.
crashed into the rocks in a very, or because of the storm or something like that. Let's listen.
in 1859. Everything was going fine until the ship reached the English coast, when it crashed into some rocks in a very strong wind
In a very strong wind
and sank to the bottom of the sea.
and sank to the bottom of the sea. Present sink, past sank.
Okay.
Now turn to part 2, questions.
This is what happened. What does Frank say about the ship called the Seabird? Letter A, it was built in 1859. Incorrect. It was coming from Australia in 1859. Letter C, it was badly made. We never speak about the conditions.
Now we are ready to start. Now turn to part 2,
Ay,
question.
Jesus Christ. We never talk about the conditions of the ship. So letter C, eliminate. The only option is letter B. You got it?
Teacher,
Elsie.
I heard something like well done, well made.
Ah, yes. At the beginning, no? Well built.
Well,
You are correct. You are correct. Oh, yes. This contradicts letter C, no? I agree with you. Exactly. It was a well-built ship or something like that. You are totally correct. Mhm. Perfect, Elsie. There you have it. So we can eliminate letter C too. You see? Now let's go to number 4. Okay. Number 4 answer is letter A. Frank says his wedding ring was made from gold he found himself. This is a very difficult line, but let me see what answer you have. For example, Elsie, what answer did you have?
I have 8.
You have a 2. Cool. How did you, or what do you remember about this section?
I I think that he didn't mention value,
Nice.
and I discard B. And I remember that I hear that a friend found something, but it wasn't gold.
It wasn't gold.
They
Correct.
mentioned other thing that I can remember.
Very good job, Elsie. Exactly. So you can eliminate letter B and letter C. Let's check the specific information of letter A. Attention.
At the moment, I'm looking for the gold from a ship called the Seabird. It was an enormous, well-built ship, and it was coming from Australia on a winter night in 1859. Everything was going fine until the ship reached the English coast, when it crashed into some rocks in a very strong wind and sank to the bottom of the sea. It was carrying gold from Australia, and most of it is still at the bottom of the sea. My wedding ring is actually made from gold, which I found on an 18th century sailing ship.
So what is made with gold? According to him. We need to repeat that, right? Okay, let's repeat.
The sea. My wedding ring is actually made from gold, which I found on an 18th century sailing ship.
Is a
A crown?
I don't know, teacher, because for me it was difficult distinguish the word gold because I heard gone, but
Oh, okay, okay.
But-
okay.
but I discard, and when you repeat, I think I thought yeah it was gold.
Yeah,
But
definitely. No problem. You are correct. The word is gold. Gold, gold, gold. We never talk about gowns because also the pronunciation is gown. Gown. What he says is wedding ring. This is explicit in the audio. My wedding ring is actually made with gold. Listen.
My wedding ring is actually made from gold, which
Made from, sorry. My wedding ring is actually made from gold. Comma, and then he gives specifications where he found the gold. That's a little bit more difficult, but that's important information, which I found. Okay. That's the specific information for letter F. Good job, Elsie. Good, good, good. Now, Benji, do you have number 5?
No, teacher, I don't understood.
You
Very
speak
well.
in present or in past?
In past,
So what is auxiliary don't in past?
I didn't. Sorry, I didn't
Okay.
understand.
Excellent. You didn't understand. Okay. So let's go then with Jessie. Do you have number 5?
Yes, but not all the information.
Okay.
I should yes, letter A because at the beginning, see, at the beginning,
Yes.
he said I was make for that I choose letter A, and after he talks about the value, I understood he spoke about the value of the right. And yes, and I don't remember the why he uh, thought, why he spoke about his friend.
Oh, okay. But we are talking about number 5.
Sorry.
Yes, my question was, what did you get?
Okay. In letter 5, I choose letter C. Yes, letter C.
Letter C?
Yes.
Interesting. Why did you choose letter C?
I am not sure. He said about his wife. His wife. I heard he said like he puts in a store. Not a store. He say other word, but I understood
Okay.
a store like I I am not sure, but like something like
Something like a store, something like a shop, something like that.
right, and he
Okay,
say
okay.
my Wi-Fi, my wife say my Wi-Fi say something like that.
Interesting. Okay, you are correct. You are correct, letter C. Very good. But you don't know why,
Yes,
right?
I remember he said my wife thinks and like put but in a store or in a shop, something like that.
Ah, perfect. Then you are totally correct. Yes, he talks about a shop and the wife wants the shop to, I mean, you know, because he accumulates a lot of things, right? Let's listen.
I found on an 18th century sailing ship. A friend of mine, another diver, has already found £88,000 worth of gold from different ships. He's now decided to give up his job and become a full-time diver. My house is full of things like coins, bottles, and old guns. My wife is always complaining about the number of objects around the house. She says I should open an antiques shop.
She says I should open an antique shop. Correct.
He say his wife is complaining for a lot of things.
Exactly. His wife is complaining. Structures.
Complain. Can you repeat? Complain?
You try to assimilate the structure. You said, my wife is. If you have the verb, you need ing.
Okay, my wife. Okay, his wife is complaining.
If you have the verb be, you need ing. ing. Ending, ing. Complain.
Complain.
Extra syllable, complaining.
Okay, yes, complain is the word.
Exactly.
Complaining.
Exactly. Yes, my wife is complaining and she told me I should open an antique shop. You see? So you are totally correct. And you remember very well. We only need to practice your structures and pronunciation because to explain, you need to catch some words. Okay. So the last one, Laurita, do you have the answer on number 6? Okay, she's not there. Let's go then with Brian. Do you have number 6?
Yes, it's letter A.
You are totally correct. What do you remember about it?
He talked about
Talks. I talk and talks.
Talked.
A dog time. Pronunciation.
He talked that teaching yourself is dangerous. And then he said that if you want to learn to dive, you must do the same that he, and it was joining to a diving club.
Exactly. Because if you go alone, it's more dangerous. So you need to go in group. No? Yes, teacher. Okay, perfect. Excellent job. Very good, people. That was the class for today. This is a standard listening for B1. So if you want a link, I can pass you more links so you can practice these audios, so you can check and verify and repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And that's the reason I insist in the listening during the course, because the listening is the most difficult part. Okay, we finished for today, my people. happy Thursday. I'll see you tomorrow for our speaking practice.
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a very good night.
Thank you, teacher. Good night, guys.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye, Laurita. See you later. Bye, Bri. See you.